Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the long-awaited informative session on deep learning and its models for image segmentation. We are extremely thrilled to host today's session in one of the most trending and cutting-edge technologies in the industry today. We are joined by one of the experts in the field and also an inspiration to all the IEEE members throughout Sri Lanka. We are pleased to host this webinar with Dr. Maheshi Bidisanayake, the chairperson of the IEEE Sri Lanka section and a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Engineering in the University of Peradeniya. So let's make this evening a great evening where we get an exposure to the industry. And before moving on, let me remind you that we will be taking a group photograph, and I invite every one of you to be ready to switch on your camera so that all your beautiful smiles can be captured at the end of the event. To begin with, let's have on screen the president of the IEEE Uvavellassa University student branch, Mr. Dinul Dasanayake, to deliver the welcome speech. Over to you, Aya.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, Aya, you're audible.
Okay, so it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar on image segmentation on deep learning. So we are really privileged that Dr. Maheshi has accepted our invitation and participating for this event. So I warmly welcome Dr. Maheshi Disanayake, who is the chairperson of the IEEE Sri Lanka section and also a senior lecturer at University of Peradeniya. And also I would like to welcome the counselor of IEEE Uvavellassa University student branch, Professor Sandhya Kumari. And also, most importantly, I would like to welcome all the participants who are participating in today's event. So let's hope this event will be a very fruitful and very knowledgeable event. And I hope everyone will get the maximum out of this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Aya, for your wonderful welcome to all of us present here in this event today. And now we'll proceed into the session, and I invite you to actively participate and make the fullest out of this wonderful opportunity. Without further ado, let's have on screen our guest speaker of the evening, Dr. Maheshi Buddhini Disanayake. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sadharma. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. In between the presentation, if the slides go missing, just message. Okay. So I will switch off the video because I see good attendance. So I want to save the bandwidth just in case. All right. So the topic that I have decided to do this talk today, that's going to be a very interesting topic. So before anything, I want to especially thank the IEEE Uvavellassa, the student branch, for having me and inviting me to deliver this talk. I'm thrilled to deliver this talk, and I have been working on this area for some time now, around 2 years. So my basic idea today is to deliver you some inputs and some keywords so that when you go into this particular area and start your own research, you know where to look for, or maybe where to search the keywords and that type of a guidance. So sometimes I might not go into much more detail into the maths parts, but instead I'll give the intuition approach, or like how you feel it. So before I start the topic, if I look into this particular picture, this is a famous application nowadays, which is automated driving. Now in a automated driving scenario, what the car sees is the one in the bottom picture here. What the driver sees is at the top. Now, the car is more interested in like outlined, not like details like us. It would like to see these lines, where the lines are, the trees in a different color, and then the vehicles are in different color. Some other things are there, they are not interested. So this type of arrangement, we call it segmentation, moving the general view into labeled arrangement. And in the topic today, we are going to see how intelligent is computers, especially in vision application. Can we make it more intelligent, improve the intelligence of the system? So with that scope, what we are going to look at is what happens in a real segmented scenario. So in a automated segmented scenario, we can do this segmentation manually, or we can do the segmentation one image at a time, because video is a set of frames. So how can we get this automated feeling? Can we let actually a vehicle think? Can we let a robot look at a vision and take some decisions? So this process is, as I mentioned, is called segmentation. So the topic I have selected for today's talk is image segmentation using deep learning, because deep learning is the hot topic. Now I'll walk you through what is vision and what is recognition, because that's the basic of any machine vision. Then we'll go into the deep learning. What's the fundamental deep learning architecture? How can we modify this deep learning architecture, which is generally defined for classification, into segmentation model? Then with the time, I will give you one or two case studies. Okay, so how do you think a machine will recognize? Now the term recognition is given if you find something matching, a match between the visual input, the input that we captured through the eye, and the mental representation. That means what we have seen earlier. If we see a match between the two, we call this as a recognition. Now in the brain, this recognition happens in a very complex way. So you have one way is you have this the stored images from our previous knowledge. So the previous knowledge is we have seen an image and then we have recorded this image. And now can we recall it and see whether that's a certain object? Let's say the car here. So can we look at this car and say, well, it's a car? Then it can be instant where you see a new vehicle, maybe new model of the car, but still we will recognize it as a car. So that happens again through the visual system, but here the mental representation or the analysis part, it analyzes using the information we already had. So we have seen a car, we have seen how it looked like. Then once a new model comes, we will look at certain features and say, this is a car, this is a pickup truck, this is another vehicle. So we are able to distinguish. Can we do the same with the machine? So when you do this machine recognition, one of the key challenges is what we call invariance. The word invariance means various representations. The front view, the view from the front, view from the back, view from the side, view from the up. So when you look at the same object from different angles, the image is different. But yet, can we recognize it? That's what makes human vision very complex and challenging work for the machine. So let's see how we can replicate it. If you think about human vision, eye is the one which captures, the device which captures the image, and it will be stored in the memory. This memory will take certain decisions. Now, similar way, you can have a computer vision system. You have the input objects, the sensing device. This is a camera. It's a sensing device. So a sensing device will read in the image and take certain image information. So we record this information. If you're familiar with image processing, those are the pixel values with the pixel intensity. So you store the information and then there will be a processing device like a computer, a desktop, or maybe different processing devices like microcontroller. And based on the information the sensing device gives the processing device, it will take a decision. Now, what are the decisions in a vision system is simply the labeling here. So here it will label there are oranges, apples, so and so. And at the same time, they will identify the outline. The human is able to identify the outline. Where let's say the drawing of the food basket, where it stops. Same goes with the machine. When you improve it, you are expecting it to identify the outline. Now, task in computer vision system, based on this, we can have 4 tasks. Sorry, 4 tasks. So one is classification. When you see an image, can you classify? Can you say what that image is about? So the first image is about a cat. If you look at the second image, in this second image, there's a red box. What it means is around the object of interest, the machine has drawn an outline. So this is called localization. If you look into the third image here, you have dogs and cats, all these animals, and you are going to detect multiple objects. So we call this application as object detection. Then the final application here, this is called instant segmentation. It's different from the object detection because we have drawn the outline, or we have drawn the background and the foreground. We have separated the background, and then we have taken the object of interest and drawn an outline, a line around it. So that is what we call as vision applications. You have classification, localization, object detection, and instant segmentation. Now, I'm not going to go into everything in detail, but I'll first introduce the classification. And then based on the classification, especially in terms of deep learning, we'll see whether we can jump directly into the instant segmentation or even segmentation. Can we segment the image using the approach in classification? So how the deep learning architecture works, if you're familiar with the machine learning, since you're coming from, most of you are coming from computer science background, what happens in a machine learning is you have these inputs, and from these inputs, images or data, you generate something called information. We call them features. So using the data, we extract some information. So the information might be where's the color red, where's the color white, where's the color black, or maybe the information is about whether the surface is smooth, surface is not smooth, or if it is a data, the information is about the rate of increase and where the data is suddenly changing, those things. So those are features. Then what we do in a machine learning is using these features we have extracted, or human has interfered to extract the features, we train some algorithms. We call it train a model. And this model will give an output label. Now, contrary to that, different to that, what happens in a deep learning is you have the inputs, but you don't worry about extracting features. So the deep learning algorithm itself will extract these so-called features. It will self-train. We need to give certain specifications, but it will train by itself. And then it will give the output. So the feature extraction part is not there in a deep learning. That's the basic difference between the machine learning, the older way of doing it, and the new way of doing this. But I have to just say, this is not the approach for like all the problems. It might be the easiest way because you take a black box, put the input, and you see an output. But that's not the best solution. For some works, this will work. Some applications, it's better for us to go for feature extraction. Yet, why we go for this particular approach is, there might be features that we haven't seen. If you think about a medical imaging, we haven't seen the features. We are not familiar with the features, but machine will see these features. And with that approach, looking into the hidden features, deep learning is best. Okay. So the basic building block. the fundamental block behind the deep learning is something called convolutional operation. In machine vision, we use deep learning, we favor the deep learning, and it's, as I said, it's used something called the convolution. So we designed the algorithm called convolutional neural network. So in I think last year I did a lecture on convolution neural networks, very deep one. This year I thought I'll just introduce it, and then I'll introduce the sufficient, and then we'll go on to the rest of the segmentation part. So what happens in a convolution is you look at it like a filter. If you have done again the image processing, you are familiar with, let's say, the Sobol filter, edge filters. So look at the convolution, same as you have that filter. And this filter, you apply the convolution operation with the image itself. So if you take, let's say, 3x3 convolution, 3x3, this filter, when you apply it to the 3x3 area in the image, it will result in one value. That value is written here. So this convolutional operation, for that you can define more than one filter. And the main focus in CNN is try to see so many small filters so you can detect small features. So each filter will detect a feature. We look into this, the motor bicycle. What you are deciding is where else the wheel is. So this is the filter for a wheel. And it will decide where the wheel is. And then where's the seat, where's the handle. For all those features you want to discover from an image, you can come up with a filter. Look at it like you have a stencil with the same drawing of a wheel, and then you pass the stencil over this entire image and see where it's matching, where it's giving the fullest match. Very similar operation, but that's the match filter. Instead of matching, we use the operation in the correlation, which used in the match filter. We use this particular operation, what we call as the convolution. Now, in the convolution, CNN, we prefer to use small detectors, small features. The detectors or the filters, these are small filters, 3x3, maybe maximum 5x5. We don't go into bigger sizes, even if the input is so big, because we want to extract small information, the slightest information where an eye or a human will miss. So with those information, you can create a set of features. That's what happened inside a CNN. Now, if you look into the CNN the architecture, what it has is the same operation, but you perform it again and again. So you have this convolution operation, it's detect features, and with the detection of these features, it generates an output. We call that output as a feature map or tensor. And this tensor has a bigger size. So we want to reduce the dimension, X and Y dimension. So for that, we use pooling operation. So in a pooling operation, rather than taking, let's say, neighboring 4 information, all the 4 information, we can average and take 1 information. So instead of 4, which is coming from the feature map, we put 1 output after the max pooling. So convolution will give 4 outputs, max pooling will reduce it to 1. In other words, we reduce. So when you're reducing, we reduce in this particular CNN arrangement the dimension, X and Y directions. So this process, this convolution and max pooling, we can repeat many times. So when you repeat it many times, towards the end, let's say if you start here at a higher number, towards the end, you have a very small number because of the max pooling. But the smaller number is extracted details because each convolution is extracting details about the input. Now, after the extraction, the next stage of CNN is what we call flattening, because the output stage here is a simple feed-forward network. And for a feed-forward network, you can't feed something like here. It's a tensor. 50 times 5 times 5 means it's a block, like a cube. So we cannot put a cube here. Instead, you flatten it. Make this arranged into a linear representation. So this feature map, you collapse it into a single dimension, just one line. And that line, you can look at it as a line, you arrange it at this point. And then you will define a fully feed-forward neural network or fully connected layer, which is the technical term used in a CNN. And here there are neurons and neuron connections are there. We spark some connections, although it looks like a mesh. In this mesh, only some connections are active, some connections are off, completely switch off. And the connections which are active, you don't use it like one-to-one mapping, you use it with a fraction. So if this line has, let's say, value coming here like something like 5, then this particular line will carry a fraction of, let's say, 1/4. So let's say input is 4 here, 1/4 is the weight in the line. So this particular point will get input from this particular line as just 1. So you have certain weights in this fully connected network so that the final output is there. So in a CNN, the main thing you need to remember is CNN is something we train or something we teach using, we call it as supervised learning. So to train a CNN, we need to give it some information and we need to say, this is the exact output. So with the supervised learning, what happens in a CNN is you give the input and you say, this is the output. And the model will repeat this circle. It will go on and on in this particular circle. So until all these weights are adjusted to map that output. So if you say, this is image of a cat, the label should come out as a cat. So you feed the input image, the cat, the output image will be the label of a cat. So the network, after this extraction of features, it's training its weights, the connection line, how much weight we are going to give this line through the iteration. That's how the CNN will train. And using that train, later when we have an unknown input, we can give the input and it will produce the correct output. Now that's what happens in a classification. In a nutshell, you have an input, it's a supervised learning. So you have the input with a label, you send it through this black box, which is a deep learning algorithm, a CNN. It will train this black box to give a specific output value. And once it learns from the labeled data, when you have the unlabeled data, you can do a certain prediction. But the challenge here in a deep learning architecture is, in the beginning, I said humans has this the view, or humans has this capacity to look at an image from different angles and say this is same image. So front view of the cat, side view of the cat, looking even behind the cat, you will recognize it's a cat. That information, you have to train it in a machine. Machine has no understanding to gather that 3D architecture and say, okay, this is the cat from any angle. It cannot do that. So you need to give the machine all different angles and say, this is a cat. So for the training process, you have to collect a significant amount of data and it will take time. So that's the classification. Now let's go into the key concept of the today's talk, which is the object detection, as well as can we do the segmentation in a multiple object scenario. So why this segmentation is challenging? I'll give you a small test or experiment. So what do you see here? If you look carefully, you will see 6 dots, isn't it? You will agree with me. There's just 6 dots are there. Now what do you see? Do you see the 6 dots or 3 groups? Which is dominating in your mind? In your decision-making process, which side it's biased? You're more biased to think about it as 3 groups rather than 6 dots. So this we call in a vision as proximity. Depending on the neighborhood, the proximity, our decisions can change. Now, this scenario, again, we can see it as 3 groups, and these 3 groups, we see it with 2 different colors. So it's a clear cut. If you look into the earlier, I'll just go it. Now, look at the movement of the balls or the dots. The dots are placed same spacing. The space between the dots are not different. They are same spacing, but because of the color arrangement, we simply see it as, again, 3 pairs. So we call this as similarity. Because of a similar arrangement, we can group it as 3. Now what happens? Because of the movement, again, we see 3 groups, although when they're on a straight line, they're at the same distance apart. So this we call it as common fate. So I introduced you 3 words so far: proximity, similarity, and common fate. The last one I'm going to introduce is, okay, same distance, but I have put boxes. Once the boxes or the outline is drawn, we see common regions again, 3 groups. But at the very beginning, what we have seen here, just we saw 6 balls, no pairs. Then we completely change our view to seeing 3 pairs. Doesn't matter what happens. Now, this is why the segmentation is challenging. Simply by seeing the one color or one with a certain information, you can't take decisions. Now, in this arrangement, you clearly see the 2 groups and 2 individuals because of this common region. So proximity is there, where you're going to place the ball, and then you have the similarity between the balls, the common face, the movements, and then the regions also going to dominate. Now, how this comes to play with the segmentation is, if you look into the image, you see the same color at certain different locations, but still, because of this proximity, we can group them together as the face area. Even slight changes are there, but still we can group it as face because of the proximity. Then you have the common regions. If you look into, let's say, the dress part of Mona Lisa, then the dress will have, again, the common fate. Common regions are there. Then similarity is there. If you look into the background, because of a certain similarity in the background, you can see it as a background, and here the face as the foreground. So with this information, you can create the segmentation. Now, earlier what we simply has to see is this is a human face and that's it. But now we are going to look into much detail. We are going to look into the concept of proximity, similarity, then the commonness in the movement. Like if it's a vehicle, let's say 2 vehicles are there, same color, but then depending on the way the 2 vehicles are moving, the machine will say one which is moving at the same speed as due to the common fate as one object, and another vehicle, same model, maybe same color, but it's moving at the different speed, so it's another different object. So these are the features which comes into play when you're deciding on segmentation. So where do you see these applications of segmentation? You see the segmentation in many applications in today's world. You can see it in image editing, especially in fashion. You can design a clothing line and then have it like online and say, dress yourself. So what you need is simply the segmentation. Place a blouse over the top half of the body and maybe skirt at the bottom half of the body. So that's through segmentation. Robotics, pick and place. This robot can pick and place it at a certain location. So when you're picking, you need to know about the outline and things if you are dealing with different type of objects. So that's another application. The autonomous driving. I'm sure most of you have now heard the word this Tesla and even the other car manufacturers, they are picking up with this autonomous driving concept. Can the car drive? So when the car drives, it doesn't have to see whether this is specifically a human, just have to see that outline and say, this has the behavior of a human. And this has the behavior of a static object. things like that. Then in medical imaging, a lot of imaging applications, you can use this deep learning and segmentation to detect, let's say, a cancer, a tumor you can detect. Then you can feed this information into the surgical team so they can take off or extract the exact boundary line, not something's outside. So these type of applications are there. They are famous in like foreign countries as well. So that's why we study this topic. All right. So we'll move on to the little bit deeper into segmentation topics. So when you think about segmentation can have different domains. One is called semantic segmentation. The other one is called instant segmentation. So what it means is you can look at an object and only identify similar objects as a group. So if you look into this example, the ground is common. And then if you look into the buildings, there are so many buildings, all buildings are labeled as buildings. The algorithm built is not trying to differentiate. It's not trying to see the difference between one building and another building. So this is called semantic segmentation. It's segmented, but you don't look into differences. Now the other object or other segmentation is called instant segmentation. Here you segment, but you look into the differences. Can you see individual person separately compared to the semantic segmentation where you had all the people as one group? Here individuals are recognized separate. Now this can be of an advantage. Let's say you are counting from a let's say basket of fruits, you are counting objects. Now when you're counting objects, rather than saying, okay, in the counting objects, you need to see the boundary lines. So you can see the boundary lines and then you can count how many objects are there. So with the segmentation, you can count it. Now, if you go from that counting into, let's say, marking attendance in a classroom, you need to see individual people different. In other words, we want to see, we call it instant. One particular moment, how it looks like. So instant information should be there. So for such an application, you need instant segmentation algorithms, not semantic segmentation algorithms. So this is where the two place different depending on your application. So we earlier learned the CNN, how to classify. If you know how to classify, now how we are going to go into the segmentation. So if you look into this particular image, it's a girl wearing a frock. Now we are trying to break it off into small areas. The frock, the shoes, and the bag separate. What happens with the earlier CNN is the classification. When you give one input, it will say that where this input belongs to. If it's the input is a cat, it will say where it's a cat. Now, same environment, if you give, let's say, this circle area and ask the machine, this CNN algorithm, to say whether it's part of a dress or not, it will be able to say that. Let's say simply thing, we are asking the CNN to see the color. So CNN can find this color. This round area is a red color. If you give more details, CNN can find that this particular circle area is a red dress. Now, that same concept we can extend to the entire area here. So we extend the small patches. We call the small circle as a patch in image analysis. So we extend these patches to the entire image. So we see the patch, we take a patch after that, we take a patch again, maybe somewhere here. Here we take a patch. Like that, for the entire image, we take small patches. And then these patches, we try to see what are they. So that patch, maybe somewhere here, somewhere there around the belt, and see the CNN label. So CNN will label this entire frock area as red frock. And it will take off the hand as well. It's a very good algorithm. It delete the hand and say the entire red area is a red color dress. And then for the rest of these other areas, it will put a label saying this is not a, this area is not, what happened? This area is not the red color frock, but it's instead, it's some other information. So now CNN is going to label the areas, label this particular area as background, label this particular area as saying address. You can expand it to the entire image, taking small patches. Each patch you label, similar labels you group together. So when you're grouping the similar labels, let's say red dress here together, you need to think about that proximity, similarity, and common trait. If you have a different, why I say that is, let's say somewhere here there's a red color cloth hanging, but the algorithm should be able to identify this is approximately different compared to the proximity of this red dress here. So because of that, these are two different labels. That's handled in the segmentation applications. So this is why segmentation is challenging, but simply we can expand the CNN algorithm we have designed earlier. So what are the challenges? Why don't you use it same as it is? So the basic challenge is, in the beginning of CNN, I mentioned the pooling operation will reduce the size of the image. So when you think about the output of the CNN, the output is labeled to give a smaller output. So compared to the original input, the output side is small because of the pooling. So how can we avoid this? So how can we mitigate this problem? So in a CNN, now the dimensions are going to reduce from the starting point here. The dimension is going to reduce conically here. So towards the end, you're dealing with a small X and Y dimension compared to the input. Now, the simple way to look at it in a bigger dimension or bigger scale is zoom it in. If you have a small size image, you want to see more details, you zoom the image. But if you zoom the image, you must have seen, you can see dots. Some pixels are squared. So to avoid that dotting behavior, we use not just zooming, but learnable zooming. So we call it increasing the size as upsampling, from a small size to upper size, sample you up, so upsampling. And rather than simply using it as the simple zoom operations, we use learnable upsampling. So once you have the learnable upsampling, you can give the output as the same resolution as the input and with the proper labels. So first, the first bottleneck was addressed simply using learnable upsampling. But the second bottleneck here is, even if you upsample, your image is not going to be very quality-wise good. We call it coarse image. Quality-wise, the input can be very low. So how can we mitigate this? We can have something called, this is learnable upsampling. So we can have something called skip connections. In other words, you upsample, I'll go back to the earlier slide. So to counteract this reducing of the dimensions in the max pooling, you have max unpooling. So when you try to unpool, you have just one information here, but it should go into 4 squares, because when you pool in, what happens is you take a, let's say, square 1, 2 by 2, and this square is reduced to just 1 point here. Now, at the receiving end, you have just 1 point there, but it has to map into 4 pixels here. So you don't know about these 3 information. This is why the image is going to be very coarse. So how can we counteract that? We can take something called skip connections. Skip connection means rather than simply having the direct information, when we are decoding the final stage of the image, we take information from previous layers. So rather than decoding it straight away, we take some information from, let's say, the layers from here and couple it with the layer here. So we connect it, skipping the other stages, direct it to the necessary point. So that's a skip connection. So when you try to upsample, you have some information about. So when you try to upsample, we have some information about these hidden areas. This is what happens in this skip connection. Okay, so in a semantic segmentation, you're still deciding this semantic segmentation. What happens is you have this reduction, which happens, dimension reduction, and the learning, which happens in normal CNN. And then you try to reverse it in an upsampling layer. So what's learned in here is the labels, precision labeling. Each pixel where it belongs to, each position of image, what's the correct label. And that is upsampled to match to the same resolution as the original. Here the labels are upsampled. So you learn here and then you inverse the learning. To improve the information or the coarseness of the image, you have this skip connection. So the skip connection will give some information about the missing data especially due to pooling. So it's evident if you give it a try, you have the input. If you have no skip connection, this is what's the final output label is going to look like. But if you add a little bit of skip connection, then you can improve the labeling. Very similar to the ground truth. Now, generally, most of you, if you have worked with the deep learning, you know, you never try to tune an algorithm from the beginning unless it's your own algorithm. If you're using like pre-designed algorithms like AlexNet, VGG, or GoogleNet, you try to use the concept called transfer learning. Using what's exactly available, you design your own process from that point onwards. So you don't start from the scratch, you start from a certain point. Now this is called the transfer learning. Same transfer learning can be applied to the segmentation. So this part, you can have it using the transfer learning, and that part you can build using your own. So that's a better approach for semantic segmentation. So what are the architectures? There are design architectures if you're interested. You have the dilated convolution, fully convolution, dense networks. UNet is there for medical imaging, even deep lab, CRF RNN is there. So you can use these algorithms, which are already available in the literature, or you can find it on Google search, and you can use this on your applications. Now the second approach I mentioned in segmentation is called instance segmentation. Now here we need to separately identify individual representation. So how we can do it? We built using the semantic segmentation algorithm, where you can identify simply outlined people, but not instances. So we approach this simply by first looking into small areas. But compared to the earlier patches we used, we group it, and then we have two types of CNN architectures. Here, earlier we had just one. We took the image, we made small patches earlier, and we send it through one CNN. But here we prefer to have two CNNs. So let's see why there's two. Let's say you have the image. First part of the instance segmentation is look into small patches. So with these patches, we can call it as proposals. So these patches are not necessarily pixels, one pixel, it's a group of arrangements. So you can create more than one patches. So this patch, you call it as proposal. Then these selected areas, you feed into two networks. Why you have two networks? One network, if you only look into this boxed area, the region of interest given to the CNN, and look at the classification point. It will look into this entire image and say whether there's a boy in it or not. In the second network, it will take this masking background. So it will go a step further, same as the instance segmentation, look into this particular region and mask the background. Take off the background, take the image area, then run it again through another CNN. So this CNN we call region CNN. This CNN we call it as a box CNN. Once you have the two decisions, you now combine it together. And what's the output will look like is, it will give you a region. In that region, I see some questions. Let me answer it afterwards. Okay, we see these regions, and then within a region, we will try to go into the areas of interest. So if you had two boys in this image, just let's say there was another boy there, the second boy will be detected in the second, as a second region. So we can differentiate. So if there's, let's say, another boy here, my drawings are not good, but let's say there's a boy. So it will come into the second box here as a separate region. And that again will go into the region interest as another box. So then here, when this outlining, it will outline the second boy as a difference region. So you have two individual regions. And this is why instance segmentation works. You identify the region, each region you separately classify. And that will give you the final output. Okay. So the application point of view, if you are going to design these things, in instance segmentation, you are more interested in where's the edge. How can you draw the outline? How sharp is your drawing? And how accurate is your drawing? This is the information you are interested in if you are going for instance segmentation. Now in the instance segmentation, there's another algorithm. We call it as multitask cascading. This is it's not recent, but it's a popular algorithm. Here again, we can use the same thing, but what happens is, earlier what we had was, we had the task, one task, then the regions are there, and the specific object is there. We put the label at one go. Other than that, here, you divide the task into separate stages. So the advantage is you save space, you save the memory, and certain processes are a little bit faster. So you can use this instance segmentation as multitask cascading approach as well. So where can we use them? So we know the little bit of background. My main idea is, or the objective is to give you some outlines, like gave you some words. You have the difference between instant and the semantic segmentation. And we know it can be approached in different manners. Now, where can we apply this? So one of the best application, or the emerging application, is healthcare sector. Now, it's not maybe happening in much in a local sense, but if you think about foreign sense, if you have watched like this TV series, medical TV series from Western countries, you would have seen they first do a surgery on a simulator. So if you can give these particular outlines, exact, let's say the tumor area, before they go into surgery, you say, okay, this is the exact tumor. Remove only that part. That's going to aid the surgery to be successful. So medical area, you can see the application of health sector, the segmentation. Then the robotics, even the automated driving, self-driving. When you see there's a human, when you see there's another object, even to decide whether I can pass through the space or the gap between two. Many accidents happen because we see the two people, but we cannot justify whether that gap is enough to go through. So you can apply the segmentation and calculate the difference between the two. And any analysis, any object detections where you need to see the specific outline, you can use the segmentation algorithms. So I'll go into one such application. How am I doing with the time? So Dharma, do I have, what's the time? Anybody from the organizing team?
Madam, actually, we planned this for as an 1 hour session. So it's, I think,
How long I have?
6:27. So
Okay.
you can.
Rather than going into the applications, shall I wrap up?
Okay, madam, that's fine.
Okay. So, okay, I'll go to the end in that case. So you can use segmentation in many computer vision applications. It's not restricted to simple image-based applications. You can expand it to even new ways where you are dealing with the image and where you want to see the outline. If you are interested to know more about this particular area, my best advice is to start working. So download, maybe you're aware of these blogs. You don't need to read books at the very beginning. Go to good established blog sites. So one is here I have given as towards data science. The other one is machine learning mastery. There are many established data sites, and have an account in GitHub, or there's another forum called Eagle. You can create an account there, see what others have done, download their codes, do small modifications and run on your own data set and see how it performs. And that will give you an idea about how the field is, or what are the restrictions there, how thorough you are with this, the deep learning algorithms and their performance. Then once you establish yourself with a good background, the basic knowledge, go to YouTube. There are many keynotes on different conferences, established conferences. And even like if you think MIT, they offer their course online for free. Harvard, there's a course. So you can go to this, the Andrew Ng has a course. So go to these YouTube channels, then develop your knowledge. If you want to go beyond that, you want to go to research, again, freely available sites are like archives. You can download papers, see the mathematics behind it, and see whether you can understand. But as a beginning, don't jump into maths. You'll get lost and you will get tired. But it's a good area because there's a future to it. You can apply it for your job, or maybe you can apply it for your higher studies or research. So if you're interested, I'm more than welcome to help you even. Drop me an email if you have some questions, or just ask questions even towards the end. Okay, I'll stop sharing. Just give me a second. Give me a second, Sudharma.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, because this is a IEEE event, I want to talk a little bit about IEEE and why you should become a member. So I'll quickly go through it since we are running out of time. What is IEEE offering you? Since we just finished the Tokyo 2020, which was held August 2021, I'll take one example. Now, this is the US relay team. So when they came to the Olympics, they were the favorite to win because individually they were performing very well. So point to 100 relay, they could have easily won it, but they failed. So what I want to say is knowledge only will not take you to your final destinations. Most of you, maybe you want to go and become, join industry and become leaders there, and you want a good payment or good salary, as well as you want a comfortable lifestyle, and you have big dreams. But remember that the knowledge you gain from the books only in today's world will not take you long distance. So if you want to improve in your career goals, you need to improve your intelligence. And today's world, the intelligence, we call it multiple intelligence. You need to know more than at least one. So rather than being book smart, you need to know about the logics, you need to be able to adapt to the nature, maybe work with people, like run, body smart, music, visuals, so many other intelligent options are there, or like multiple intelligent theories are there. So when a company wants to hire you, they want to hire you for a couple of things, not just because you have a good first class degree. So what IEEE gives you is an opportunity for especially you who are undergraduates to involve in these co-curricular activities. Your own student society will give you a platform to work with students and improve your critical thinking because you're working with a group, logical thinking, analysis, creative thinking, then the leadership, how to engage with humans. So these are the things which given by IEEE. So with that, I would urge you to take the membership, make it as a knowledge hub. IEEE is known for its knowledge hub. Work with the community. You can engage with your local students who are working in the same environment like computer science or electrical electronic engineering. And then you can expand that easily to the regional level, global level recognition. You can reach a global level recognition through IEEE. So this will help you to improve your professional life. The only way of achieving this is after taking the membership, do volunteering. So I'll skip the rest of the slides because of the time. So I would ask or urge every one of you here, if you are IEEE member, get involved with your student community, volunteer, develop these skills, leadership, the other like event planning skills, time management skills. Then you will be confident about you. You will have a knowledge. You will have even a support group. You will feel like you are worth it. So with that, I will stop. So I'll urge you to join IEEE as well. Okay, over to you, Sudharma.
Thank you, ma'am. After this explanatory session, you might have questions regarding today's topic on deep learning or its importance in the industry today. So then this Q&A session is just for you. So your questions are very welcome. You can either post them in the chat or you can simply unmute yourselves and speak up. And as you organize your questions, let me remind you, after the Q&A, we will be taking a group photo. So the virtual background is provided in the Drive link that's in the chat box. And so you can touch up and have a nice photograph with all the participants joining us this evening. At the same time, folks, I request you to spare a moment to fill the feedback form that would be provided, and so that we will be able to provide you with more informative and interesting webinars in the future. So
Sudharma, there are 2 questions in the chat. Shall I take?
Yes, ma'am, you can take the question.
So one question is, can we do instance segmentation and detect path without training a model by feeding label data to object detection? Actually, you don't have to train models. That's what I mentioned as transfer learning. So look into the option of transfer learning, and the transfer learning will help you. I think the question is asked from Nirodya. You can use the transfer learning option. So it's a pre-trained model. So use the trained model as it is. and see whether it's work for your application. You might have to tune it. It might not 100% work for your particular application. Learn how to tune this using transfer learning models. Then you can perform the task, like you can label, but you have to modify the code here and there to suit your application. So I hope I answered Nirodha's question. Second one is, does Sri Lanka industry use the technologies? If yes, what are them and what are the qualification to obtain a job in such company? So yes, Sri Lankan industries, yes. I mean, any industry in today's market, they use machine learning. They're interested in machine learning. And if you look into even deep learning, there are robotics related industries which are using the technologies, which are more than using, actually they are interested in using this technology. What they expect from you is the ability to build your own model, maybe not from scratch, but if a model is given, if you see, let's say AlexNet, can you look into it and then tune it so that it suits your application? So that's what the most industries are looking for. So the qualification will be, the first thing is, even if you say you have done the COSIA courses, if you're not familiar with how to work it, the hands-on experience, the coding, you will be in a difficult question. So I would advise you to get a hands-on work, do your own coding and working on a 1 or 2 applications. Can you tell me what is the name of a subject in COSIA about image processing with deep learning? Okay, I can't really recall names, but usually people like to follow a person called, there's a lecturer from, I think, Stanford, called Andrew Ng. And people are kind of like crazy about his courses. So you can go for that course, Andrew Ng's course, look in YouTube. And if you like the course, then you can go to COSIA and register. There are other courses as well. MIT offers courses. There are many courses actually. I use the Ning's course. That's why I said the Ning's course. There's even Lex, I can't remember the final, I think Lex Luhmann or someone who's specially designing some courses related to like robotics vision. So you can follow them. Best thing is have a Google search or do a little bit of a background search, and then you will get familiar. Drop me an email. I'll send you a couple of links if I find. Okay, that is Tushara's question. There's another one asking. Okay, I think we have covered. Dharma, those are the only questions there.
Thank you, ma'am.
Madam, yeah, can I ask?
There's another question.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yes, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you for informative webinar. Actually, my question is, one of the challenges in deploying deep learning architectures in real time is because they are resource heavy, it takes some time to process. What are the innovative methods to mitigate that challenges in recent researches?
Okay, you're asking about deployment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Sandra, if you're familiar with the deep learning, training is not the deployment stage. Testing is the deployment stage. So usually time consuming and GPU restriction, all this comes when you're training the model in most applications. But when you're testing the model, that if you look into like heavy complex algorithms like YOLO, you can train it very heavy GPU around environments. But once you're deploying, you have the capability to adjust it to some things like a mobile phone. So you need to distinguish between whether you want to deploy it. In the deployment stage, you want to update it. That means train it again and again. So rather than using the GPUs, one approach is to reduce the size of the CNN architecture, or like reduce the number of layers. So the number of features you are learning in that particular algorithm is less. The other thing is you extract certain features and give it to the algorithm. So algorithm is not doing the extraction from the beginning, but it's starting from certain steps after. So its processing time is reduced. So that type of pre-processing you can apply if you are really worried about the training time. But generally, deep learning at the deployment stage is, I mean, it doesn't require much hardware, not much hardware, not much memory. Is it okay, Sandalu?
Yeah, madam. So,
yes, Sandalu.
I think that's all for the questions. And now, as we have a very limited time, I'd like to invite everybody to please switch on your cameras and smile for our group photo. So please, everybody, switch on your cameras. And it would be great if everybody could switch on their cameras so that everybody's faces are there in the today's session to show that everyone has participated. So please switch on your cameras and support.
I think that's all participating. So let's take the photograph.
Yes.
Okay, guys, smile, everyone. Give me a second. Okay. Right. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you very much for everyone who's joining with us. And on behalf of everyone joining with us tonight, I thank our guest speaker for her kind presence. And to elaborate on the gratitude, we'd be pleased to have on the screen the Secretary of the IEEE Uvavelas University Student Branch, Ms. Hasini Munasinghe.
It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks this event to you all. On behalf of IEEE Uvavelas University Branch, I'd like to thank our guest speaker, Dr. Mahesh Dissanayaka, who is the present chairperson of IEEE Sri Lanka section, as well as immediate past chair of IEEE Women in Engineering Sri Lanka section. We want to extend our gratitude. And next, my heartfelt thanks goes to Professor Sandhya Kumari, who is the counselor of IEEE Uvavelas University Student Branch, and Mr. Tevel Raj, who is the advisor of Robotics and Automation Society chapter of IEEE Uvavelas University Branch, and Mr. Tisara Pereira, who is the assistant network manager of Uvavelas University. You are exceptionally helpful to us. Finally, I would like to thank all the participation who made this event successfully. With your immense support and enthusiastic participation, we were able to conduct this session very successfully. Once again, I thank one and all present here. Thank you. Over to you, Nangi.
Thank you very much, Akka. So that's all that we have for today's session. And we hope to come back to you with another informative session as today. So hang up with us, guys. And until we meet again, have a nice day. Good night.